Come on, duck. What's up, buddy? They're out in droves.
There's not a lot of people fishing.
Yeah, go check the spots.
Oh, really?
Oh my God, there's like 8 people at the dam. Oh. Hello and welcome back to another Jack Pine Savage Outdoors adventure. Today we are going to do a tutorial on how to float fish for Michigan steelhead. Today I'm running an Okuma SST 9'6" medium light. This is a Baitcast Drifting Rod, and this is the first time I've ever used this rod.
Really? That's the first time I've ever used this rod.
Can you tell them what you got there, bud?
It's like the same thing, really. It's a 10'6".
Okuma SST Drift?
Okuma SST medium, actually.
Oh, medium, okay. That'll work good for kings too, then.
I bought this in 2018.
Okay.
This has been in my garage with tags on it, and I didn't even know about it.
For 4 years. Using 30-pound Power Pro high vis. 30 pounds seems gratuitous for steelhead. I mean, weight-wise, it absolutely is. It's more for the line diameter because braid floats on top of the water really well. And we want to keep our line on top of the water and direct to our float as much as we can in this style of fishing. It's kind of a finesse style of fishing. It's technical. It's easy to get frustrated.
I lose one hook leaving.
Well, you might as well. I hate to break this to you, but as we say in steelhead fishing, if you ain't tying, you ain't trying.
Right. If you check out the Alaska silver video, I didn't lose a single lure. I lost one, and the fish must have shook it out. It's in the video, and I like see it in the water, and I like go and pick it up, and I'm like, there it is. There, I guess I didn't lose it.
All right, so now we've got our main line. I am tying on a bumper. I've got 23-pound clear floating mono made by Blood Run. And I like to pull out, I like to tie my bumpers pretty long. I'll never fish this deep, but it's nice to have more than less. So I'm gonna pull out 3 wingspans of line there.
It's 20 feet, call it?
18-ish, something like that, yeah. And how I like to join these lines is by tying a uni to uni knot. So I start with, I've got my braid and I've got my mono. Got my lines crossed and pinch them together. Make a loop. I'll start with the mono side. And then you take your tag end and you wrap it around. Through the loop. Through the loop. It's getting sloppy on me here. Tighten her up. Through the loop. Through the loop. Through the loop. And 7 times.
Do it 7 times.
7 times on the braid side. Cinch it down.
Oh, right.
Okay. Now we come over to our mono side. This is 23-pound mono. It's a pretty big diameter. So we're going to go probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times through the loop. Make sure you wet your mono. Cinch that down. And I take the 2 knots, pull them together, and that's where the magic happens. Tag in, make sure it's nice and tight. nice and tight. And I pull it like as hard as I can pull it. And if I can't break that knot, then it's a good knot. All right, that's how you tie your monotool braid using a Uni to Uni knot.
Do you leave any tag? Like get like a millimeter tag?
No, especially on my mono side. I trim them like crazy tight.
I always get so nervous doing that.
Nick and snag.
So how many times have you seen a knot like set itself?
Right,
but I
right.
suppose that's
well, it's kind of the beauty of the Uni knot is the harder you pull, the tighter it gets.
And that's also why you pull it as hard as you can.
And I pull it as hard as I can. No, I want to tug that sucker like to the point of where you're gonna cut yourself.
Right.
And the knot doesn't fail. Then you know you got your good knot. So now we got our bumper on there. Let's reel that bad unit in. All right. We've got our blood run floating mono bumper. This also will float on top of the water, but it's got a little bit of stretch to it.
It does.
And it's clear, so in the water, it's practically invisible. I'm gonna set myself up with a fixed float setup. All right, so we've got our bumper tied on there. Next thing we want to do is get ourselves a float. I'm gonna use 20 gram Raven 20 gram float. It's a little larger than I'd usually use in this river system, but we're going for a bigger float so it's more visible, so we can hopefully get some good on-camera bobber down action. The bobber down skis, bobber Van Downens. So for this Raven fixed float, you want to cut off a couple pieces of this 16th inch surgical tubing. One about as long as the top stem, one is about as long as the bottom. You take your two pieces of surgical tubing, short one first, long one second. Today it's raining, so it shouldn't be too much of a problem, but usually you want to wet the stem of your float. Slide it on there. It's good and snug. Wet the bottom stem and slide it on there. So I got my two pieces of surgical tubing holding my float on there. This makes it so I can adjust my float depth where I want to fish at. And next we want to add some inline weight. So this is a 20 gram float. I usually try and stay about 7 grams lighter with my inline weight. So I'm going to pair that 20 gram float with a 14 gram inline weight with a built-in swivel. I like these a little better than doing shot lines. It's less stuff on your line to tangle up. I know everybody's free to experiment, set it up however they see fit, but personally I prefer the inline weight. And I tie this on with a Uni Knot too. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Let's go 7 on this one, just cuz. Snug that down, slide it down. Snug a little more, slide it down. And that is a fixed float with an inline weight. Pretty much ready to fish. Oh, except we got cut off the tag end. All right. So now, that unit's ready to go, almost. Let's set Zeb up with a little different setup here. We're gonna give him a sliding float. Sliding floats are more advantageous for when you're, I personally think, for when you're first learning to steelhead fish, especially in tight rivers. In Michigan, we have a lot of really woody rivers, a lot of overgrowth. So the less line you've got out below your float to throw out there to try and cast when you're in the woods and the trails and stuff, the less likely you're going to end up in the trees.
This reel is the same one that I used in Alaska for salmon and stuff like that.
Okay.
Except generally I use a 7.5 foot rod, just because they're easier to maneuver.
Right, right.
Whatever, you know.
You're going to want the length for salmon and steelhead for the head shakes.
Well, and it's easier to mend your line with a longer rod. I know that that's true.
So for a slip float setup, you want to do a bobber stop. You can use the little rubber bobber stops, but I'm not a huge fan of them. Again, what I like to do is take a little piece of, this is 80 pound Pro V. This is like musky braid, 80 pound. I keep a little bit of that in my float box, and I'll just do a little uni with it around my main line for a bobber stop.
You don't buy the little fill plastic tube?
The little plastic tube knot ones, they get messed up.
Right.
The little rubber ones get cut on your line and quit working.
Yeah, I always double them up.
Yeah, so you got to put two on, and then like one gets blown out and slides the other one. But I found that little bit of musky braid on there.
Totally makes sense.
And I get it.
It's probably the same thing. You know?
Oh, you're really tight. As tight as I can get it on that main line. Get that.
But you still only do one stop.
On there, good and tight. You can do two. I mean, we can put a rubber one on there too.
No, I'm just saying, like, in your experience, you're that confident with that.
Well, what I'm happy with that is, like, if it does get fucked up, it's not like a rubber stop where you have to pull it off, everything off your line. You just grab another little piece,
right?
Tie it on there, and keep fishing. Yeah, dude. Yeah, you don't have to cut your whole rig off, redo everything.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'll be dipped.
Right? Where's the gutters? These ones are the good ones.
Right, like that's what those stuff.
No, see, that one cut. There we go. So we'll throw a rubber bobber stop on there too. And we want a small bead. And then we're going to give you a big indicator bead too. It'll be really easy to see. Yep.
See, I use those when I just do the spring bobber.
Right.
Fishing with like a whole bunch of split shots.
Right. Little pro tip thing I do with these Raven or the Blood Run slips that have the little plastic tube sticking out the bottom. Trim it flush. When you crank a real hard hook set, it'll come up and bash that tube. Fuck it up, split it out, and then... yeah, and then it gets frayed, then your line snags in it. But if you trim it right off flush to the balsa wood, then it seems to hold up a lot longer. This is a more technical rig. It's a more versatile rig, but it's a way easier casting rig. And then we put a bead on the bottom. That bead on the bottom is going to protect our knot. And then since Zeb's got a 24 gram slip float, we're going to pair that with an 18 gram inline swivel. So that way we're about 6-7 grams under. So you can fish up to a 1/4 ounce jig head without having to change your rig.
So what's your target weight you're shooting for?
I go like 3/4 of what the float calls for on my main like bumper rig. And then you want to be as close to what the float calls for as possible when you start fishing.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, so the float is rated for the maximum weight of the rig beneath it.
Exactly.
And you can't exceed that.
Exactly. If you exceed that, it no longer floats.
Well, or it's riding too low, or it's all
right.
Right.
But you want to be as close to that without going over as possible.
Yeah, right.
When you're steelhead fishing, because you want the most subtle hits to show up on your bobber.
Well, that totally makes sense.
Yeah, you don't want them to have to like hammer it to see the bite.
Right.
So now we've got Zeb's slip float set up. So when you go to cast, you'll have this. Can be
6
way
feet or
wherever you want it. You know, we'll put it up there with the braid. But when you're casting, you can reel all the way down here, and then you just got your 2-foot leader down here with your extra 1/4 ounce of weight, and you're not trying to throw around 9 feet of line in a 9-foot bucket. So that's ready to go, and that's how you rig either a fixed or a slip float for Michigan Steelhead. All right, so now we've got our floats tied on. We've got our rigs all set to go. Now let's talk about leaders. I'm gonna fish spawnies today, for starters. So I want about 3-foot leader. Your good old 8-pound Seagar Red Label trout line. What we're gonna do here is we're gonna tie on a size 6 Raven Specialist hook. So, and again, you know, do whatever you're comfortable with, fish however you like. Everybody will find their own way of doing things. Personally, I like tying an egg loop to my hook. That way I have versatility. So how you tie an egg loop is you take your hook and you run the line backwards through the eyelet like so. So it's parallel with the hook shank, and you're going to hold the hook shank and that line with your other hand and wrap around the hook shank 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. And then see how I hold that with my other 2 fingers. Come down to the end of your leader, grab your tag end, go back through the eyelet, lay that back parallel with the hook shank again, holding it all. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I'm screwing it up, 6, 7 times around. See, I got my tag end in there. Then after you wrap it around, pull that tag end. Now, make sure you pinch your knot. You want to keep all those coils nice and tight until you cinch it down. And then, so, cinch that down, pull that tag end, and now what you have is you have this little bait loop that you can pop up. You can loop a piece of yarn through there, you can loop it around skein, you can loop it around your spawny if you want to help hold your spawny on there. It just gives you a little bit more versatility to help keep your bait on the hook when you're throwing these casts. So we've got our egg loop tied. Again, we're going to trim our tag end nice and tight. And that is a size 6 Raven Specialist hook on 8-pound Seaguar red label. Stick a rod here. And again, I like to tie that Uni Knot. Just fast and easy for me. 5, 6, and 7. Always wet your knots. And now I don't want to ream on this. I check your knot, make sure it's good, but don't go crazy because you will break that 8-pound leader. That's another thing. And now we've got our leader tied on. But remember, we've got a 20-gram float with only 14 grams of weight under it. So now we got to run some split shot. Got our leader. We want to take a couple half-gram BB shots, and I like to stay about 8 inches up from the hook. Pinch on a half-gram BB shot. About another 8 inches or so. Another half-gram BB shot. And pinch them on. Now, that should be pretty close to how I want it to fish. But once we get down to the river and see how it acts in the water, we'll decide whether or not we want to put a couple more shot on there. I'm just going to grab a few shot and throw them in my pocket. So that seems to be the handy way to do it. When you're float fishing, you really have to pay attention to how your float acts in the water. I'm going to set really shallow just for demonstration purposes first. See how I'm only maybe, what, 4 feet deep to my lure? Running really shallow. Look it out there. Now see how my float's moving along at the same speed as current. It's kind of just trucking along with the current. That means usually that you're not getting bottom contact. You want to be really close to, if not getting bottom contact as you float through the hole. So you want to look for the occasional little wobble in your bobber. You want to see it tip forward slightly. If it's just cruising along, right along with the bubbles and current, then you're way too shallow. These fish live with their bellies on the bottom, so you got to get your food down there to them. Let's see. Adversely, you're set way too deep. Let's get her out there. See how my bobber's dogging forward, dragging and hanging up? That means that you're fishing too deep. It means your weight's dragging on the bottom, you're not getting a good presentation to the fish because your lure's just down there in the muck, in the mud. So you want to look for that sweet zone where now we're fishing about 7 feet deep, I'd say. And there it is. There it is. Now notice how my float is ticking. You see it bump the bottom every once in a while. A little boop here. But it's not hanging up. It's not just dragging and laying forward. That tells you that your lure is just down, barely getting bottom contact. Occasionally. This might even be a touch too deep because I'm getting a lot of contact. So we're just going to move our float down like another 3 inches or so. Just a slight little adjustment. And now we're fishing. See how it just makes occasional bottom contact, but for the most part, it's up and slightly forward. Whenever it hits bottom, it goes slightly forward. See the little ticks? It's exactly what you're looking for when you're float fishing. So that lure is barely touching the bottom. It'll skiff off the bottom every once in a while, but for the most part, it's suspended. It's up out of the muck where the fish can see it, right at eye level with them laying down there. Oh my goodness. And we hope for the best. That was very fishy. Very fishy. Yeah, that spawning's almost torn loose too. That was very fishy. A bulk shot. So today the river's pretty fast. This current's moving pretty good. We're gonna try something. You slide your split shot down. Now remember when I was saying you don't want to pinch them down too tight, so that you got some customizability without burning your leader. We're gonna bulk all my shot up like that. Let's get real crazy with it. Let's go right down to the first BB. I'm gonna bulk all the shot up right like this. So instead of swinging down through the hole, this is gonna make my bait rocket right down to the bottom fast. And it'll help get that spawny right down to the bottom, right where it needs to be. Hopefully get a bite out of this hole. All right, so let's start bulking that shot up. Swing her on over here. I don't see that tip's really crazy. This is a little bit more of a bulk shot. What's going on here? There we go. All right, give it a little center pin cast. See how that stacked up really fast? How that bait got right down to the bottom fast. Pounded right down in the pocket real quick. Come on, fish. Here, fishy, fishy, fishy. Come on, fishy, fishy. Not my shit. being on the ice since December, it's really refreshing to be back out and on my feet, fishing again, enjoying the rivers and streams and tributaries of beautiful Northwestern Michigan. And I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to like and subscribe, all that good stuff. Leave a notification, ring the bell, and I hope it helped to educate someone out there, to inspire them. Get out on the river, have fun, explore this beautiful resource that we have all around us, and respect the resource. And again, like I said, thanks for coming and watching the video, folks. I sincerely hope you enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. I hope you had a great time watching it. And make sure to come back and watch some more of our videos. I'm out.